Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this episode of 30 Minutes to President's Club. My name is Armand Froke, and I'm here with my co-host, Nick Cegelski. And folks, we have a famous club member, multiple-time Hall of Fame guest of 30 MPC here, the one and only Vin Matano. If you do not know him, he was a multiple-time President's Club account executive over at DemandBase. Nick, why should people listen?
So Vin's a 3-time President's Club qualifier, and he did it without using sequences and without making any cold calls. He did it almost exclusively via email, LinkedIn, and Twitter prospecting. And so he's going to take you through his structure in this episode for prioritizing accounts, what his outbound messaging and emails and tweets looked like, and how he was able to make it to President's Club using those channels.
And we are in the live studio today. So if you're not catching this one on YouTube, you might want to turn it on. And a 3, 2, 1, let's welcome in Vin.
All right, Vin, welcome to the show. We start every single episode with your top 3 actionable takeaways. So let's get your 3.
All right, so first one is Fire. And Fire is used to prioritize accounts. When you're going outbound, you obviously can't send an outbound email to every single account that you own. So you need to prioritize your accounts. So Fire is an acronym. The F in Fire stands for fit. This just means you're going after the accounts that are essentially a good fit. They're in the right industry, they're the right size. They'd basically just be a really great customer.
Yeah.
Then you have I, which is intent. Have they ever showed any interest in your product or services? You can use an intent provider to get that data. Then you have the R, which is relationship. Have they ever chatted with you, your company? Are they connected with your executives? Is there some sort of relationship there? And then you have E, engagement. Have they ever engaged with anything, whether it's assets you own, content, going to your website, going to events, etc.
Very nice. What's number 2?
Number 2 is using my 4-part cold email structure. So whenever you send an email, there's typically 4 parts of that cold email structure. So the first one would be the observation, something that you've noticed or observed through your research. The second part would be a problem statement. So based off that research, what is the problem associated with that? The third would be the solution, aka what your product or services do and how they help. And then 4 would be a CTA.
All right, round us out. What's number 3?
Number 3 is the but therefore rule. So I truly believe that storytelling is one of the most important skills in sales. If you can tell a great story, you can get people on board and really believe what you're saying. And so the rule for that is using, anytime you find yourself saying, and then we do this, and then we do that, especially when you're demoing, switch that out for but therefore. So it looks something like this, like you're trying to increase your revenue, but your sales team doesn't know who to go after. Therefore, it's affecting your pipeline.
So could you give me an example, maybe from your time at DemandBase or selling any other product in the past? What would Fire look like as you're prioritizing accounts?
One of the things that I tried to do at DemandBase was basically try to tier my accounts from 1 to 4. 1 being the best fit accounts, and that's where I really, really want to spend most of my time as a seller. All the way down to 4 being the not so good accounts. If they come inbound, maybe we'll check them out. When you're literally going through this exercise, you want to look through your entire territory and literally mark. You can say, hey, which accounts are in the right industry? If you sell to other software companies, that's obviously what you would look for. So that's what I did. I would say which companies are in the software space. I would check them off. They would get a check. Next, you would go into that intent piece and you basically follow suit. And if they have 4 checks, that's your tier 1 account. That's the accounts that you want to spend all of your time on as a rep. And if you're working closely with an SDR, they can maybe tackle those 2 and 3 accounts.
Then just so folks get some context, when you were doing this, how many total accounts were you working? Like, are we talking 20 accounts? Are we talking 500? What does that look like?
I think we owned about 200 accounts, target accounts as a rep. And then you would basically have your top 50 and then each rep would have top 5. So that Fire exercise is really, really important to make sure that you're properly selecting the top 5.
So you would have 4 tiers, tier 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 accounts were in tier 1, 50 were in tier 2. What was the split for 3 and 4?
Depends how qualified they were. Sometimes if you had a really great territory, you would have a majority of those accounts falling in tier 3. Or if maybe you didn't have such a gracious territory, maybe there would be more accounts in that tier 4. And some of the things that I would look for that maybe weren't on the surface level was like, would there be some sort of trigger or reason for us to reach out and have conversations now? That could be like if they're expanding, they're hiring more. That could be if one of their competitors recently bought your solutions. Stuff like that would allow me to say, okay, we need to prioritize them.
Yeah, for me, I would have A, B, and C tier pretty similarly. And A tiers would be people who wanted to buy now. So they're like hand raisers, intent signals. Maybe they raised a round and I have a solution that helps people value their equity after a fundraise. It's timing-based triggers. And that might be 10 of 50 accounts or like 20% of accounts. Then your B tiers would be the people who want to buy it all. So maybe not right this second, but they're growing 20% year over year. They're really hot accounts. And that might be another 20 of the 50 accounts or 40% of your book. Right. And then the final chunk would be sort of what's left that you're even allowed to sell to. So the people who like could buy at all. So that could be like anyone that falls within your ICP. The remaining 20 accounts, like they might not be growing. They might not be like the hottest accounts in the world, but they at least have the right company fit, the persona fit, and stuff like that. So you could sell to them versus everyone else that you frankly just like disqualify because your product can't even actually support them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's actually get into your email structure of when you reached out to these people. Because one of the things that's always stood out to me, Vin, is like you were a 3-time President's Club winner at DemandBase, and you weren't really like a phone first guy. I think
No.
most of the meetings, if not all of the outbound meetings you booked, came from outbound email prospecting.
Yep.
I want to get into what went into your individual emails, but I'm actually curious if we like take one step back and look at like your email sequence structure. Because I imagine you were using a sequence when you decided, hey, this is a really good fit account. This is a really good contact for me to reach out to. What did the outbound cadence look like for you?
All right. So you might fall off your chair, but I did not use sequences,
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Tell me about that.
which I wouldn't recommend, by the way. Like if
Yeah.
you're, especially if you're a new rep, like do not take this advice, but this is just what worked for me. What I was finding was I was building all these really complex sequences.
Yeah.
And my outreach was so one-to-one that the sequences actually were just getting piled up in my tasks.
Yeah.
It was actually giving me a lot of anxiety. I was like, whoa, I have to send like 40 emails today.
Mhm.
I just stopped using sequences altogether.
Yeah.
And basically I would follow it where I would just focus on like 5 to 10 accounts per week.
Yeah.
And those would be the ones that I would just consistently follow up on. So I didn't need a sequence reminding me.
Mhm.
And so I did not use sequences probably for the last 3 years of selling.
Those were your President's Club years.
And those are the present. Yeah, exactly. There was the President's Club years, and I think also like I had a smaller territory, so I had to be a bit more strategic.
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend using a sequence though, because for most people that might be a bit chaotic.
How often would you follow up with any individual prospect then, knowing that it was just email?
Well, usually I would do my first touch point, and I would do 3 touches at once.
Okay.
So I would send my highly personalized email, and I was like very confident in my email ability. So I would send a really highly personalized email. It was relevant.
Mhm.
There was an ask in there. There was value. But oftentimes the challenge is like getting them to open the email. And this is where I would use other channels to basically get their attention back to my email.
Okay.
So I'd send this highly personalized email. Then I would connect with them on LinkedIn or just comment on something, just like make sure that I was in front of them somewhere.
Mhm.
And then I would leave a voicemail.
Okay.
And for me, I'm not really great on the phone. So I was truthfully hoping just to get the voicemail and just leave it and just leave. Oftentimes I would also use other channels like Twitter and video. But
Mhm.
basically the whole goal was just like open my email because I was very confident if you opened the email, you'd answer.
What would you say on Twitter?
Twitter, I would use as a touch point, right? So I wasn't expecting to book any meetings off Twitter, although I have in the past. I sold to marketers. Marketers are pretty active on Twitter for the most part. At least they were. I basically would record a video on my phone and literally tweet it to them. But I would use it like a voicemail. So it'd be like a 60-second video, be kind of high level, but like you kind of knew why I was making this video, but you kind of needed to answer me to find out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I would drop them that video and tweet it to them. Sometimes people would answer me over email and be like, hey man, I saw your tweet. Some people would literally tweet me back and be like, I'm going to email you right now. Sometimes they didn't answer. I had one occasion where somebody blocked me, but that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Only one time.
That's better than me.
That's pretty good.
So if Armand were your prospect and you'd sent him a really highly personalized email,
Mhm.
you're sending him this tweet video to get his attention to go back to that highly personalized email.
If he's active on Twitter, yeah.
What would you say in that video that you're tweeting at Armand? What does that actually sound like? So folks can like pick this up and use this on their own.
Yeah, so it would definitely reference the email, right? So like
Okay.
if I was prospecting Armand, I would do a ton of research. I'd probably find out that he was a wrestler. Maybe I found out that you guys had a vending machine business if I was really, really, really good, right? And so I would somehow use that in my email,
Okay.
right? But the tweet would say something like, hey Armand, shot you an email about your vending machine business. And that's all I would say.
Yeah.
Let me know if you got it, like something like that.
Yeah.
And that way he's like, oh wait, how does he know about that? And he'll check it out.
Okay. So so that's what's in the tweet copy.
Yeah.
But there's a video that's in this tweet also. Are
Yeah,
you
it's pre-
basically
it's pretty similar, yeah.
Yeah.
Like for example, I'll give you a concrete example. So there was this CMO that was on this podcast,
Mhm.
and he was basically talking about like the state of personalization. And so I sent him this I thought like one of the best emails I ever written, but he never opened it. So I tweeted him and I left him a video and I said, hey Andrew, like just listen to your podcast on the B2B Growth Show where you talked about personalization, and I shot you an email with some thoughts. And then he talked about how he got into cycling like in the first half of the video. So I
Yeah.
was just like, I recently got into cycling too.
Yeah.
Just that little drop of personalization just showed him that he was like, should I be answering this guy? Like,
Yeah.
do I know this guy?
Yeah.
Or like, this is totally not spam. That was one where he tweeted me back. It was a CMO. And we got into a conversation early on with him. And usually those CMOs come in much later in the deal.
One of the things that I really like about you're not just referencing, hey, I sent you an email. You're referencing the personalization of the email. So it's one thing to tweet at Armand and be like, hey, I sent you an email. Not sure if you got a chance to see it. Plus, here's a video for you. You're saying, hey, I sent you an email about the vending machine business that you ran, or I sent you an email about your interview on this podcast. Check it out. And that's what gets them to open the video or take note of the message that you're sending. you reuse that personalization that you find again and again and again when you're reaching out to these people as a way to get their attention in the first place. It's just sort of a variation of like the subject line and the preview text of a really good email. If you can't even get them to look at the message, doesn't matter how good it is.
Dude, you're already doing all the work and doing the research.
Right.
All that work up front, usually up front when you start prospecting, that's where you spend a little bit more time on the research, but you're using that for every touch point.
Yeah.
You already did the research. So like use that in your in-mails, use that in your voicemails, use that like literally every single touch point, use that personalization.
So a lot of times what I'll see sellers do is the first email is hyper-personalized, the first Twitter video is hyper-personalized, and then the next 17 touch points are all completely templated. So you're not using sequences. So my guess is that was probably not a problem you faced. How do you think about the follow-up emails and touch points?
I would stop reaching out after like 4 touches.
Yeah.
And I would just rinse and repeat because I was like, this is highly personalized. Like I need to move on to somebody else.
Yeah.
Because this value prop makes sense. It's a timely manner. If they're not interested or not in market, I need to move on to somebody else. And so I would literally probably have 4 touch points. And I think what a lot of reps go wrong, at least the SDRs that I work with that are just getting into personalization, I think they kind of fire their load too quickly. Like they just like everything they find out, they're like, I need to put it in this email. It's like, no. You found out 4 different things. Those are 4 different emails. Don't exhaust all of your ammunition. And I think a lot of reps unfortunately do that because they're so excited. Like I found all this great data. If it's an amazing email, you're confident about it. You have the 4-part email structure, you have the value and the CTA, and they don't even open it, resend the same email. It's probably a subject line issue or deliverability issue, one of the 2.
Could you give an example of what would be 2, 3, maybe even 4 different touch points that would be different enough despite the fact that you're selling the same product?
When you're doing the research for even crafting this email, there's typically a few things that I like to look for. And broadly speaking, it's in 2 main categories. You have the company that the person works for, and then you have the prospect, the actual person. So you can do a bunch of research about the company. You can see something like, are they hiring? Did they recently get funding like you mentioned? Did they release a new product? This is just generally about the company. Was their CEO mentioned in some interview or did he win an award? She or she win an award, right?
Yeah.
That's stuff that's just about the company that will never change no matter who you're reaching out to at that company. But then at that person level, that might vary between multiple different stakeholders. And so now you have all this different information about the company, about the person, whether they're hiring, whether this person just got promoted, whether a competitor just did something, right? So you basically have to categorize all these different research points, and that would be different email touch points.
Yeah, there are 2 ways that I used to approach this at Carta. The first is you can find 3 different research points and use those in 3 different emails to give you 3 different angles on your solution. The other thing that you can do is you can take the same research point and then you can vary the product or the problem you solve in each of the emails. So for example, if someone raised a round at Carta, we were an equity management solution, which helped people issue stock options, do valuations, and help them manage their accounting compliance so that if they got audited, they wouldn't get in trouble. So we could take that fundraise and in the first email just say, when you fundraise, this is how you need to issue out equity. In the second email, we could say, when you fundraise, this is why you need a valuation. In the third email, we could say, when you fundraise, this is how you need expense accounting. And so you can take the same research trigger and you can use that to shine a light on 3 different parts of your product, or you can find 3 different triggers and use each of those in their own one-off email.
I would caution you not to try to connect all those emails though, because I think what like product marketers do when they create sequences is they try to tell a story. And chances are they're not reading those other emails, which is why you're on email 5.
Yeah.
So I agree, that's a good strategy, but just try not to have them linked too much. Like just try a whole new email at that point.
I'm curious actually about threading because I feel like there are 2 approaches to follow-up emails when you're outbounding. Approach 1 is you want to follow up to your last email, your email before that, your email before that, so the prospect can see, hey, this person has reached out again and again and again. They're really pleasantly persistent. And then there's another approach where it's like, no, like if they didn't respond to your first email, you actually want to start a whole separate thread that's not attached to the first one, because if they didn't respond there, you don't want to remind them that they ignored you the first time. I'm curious about your approach, Vin. Like, what's your recommendation from a best practice perspective?
I remember vividly only replying to my own emails.
Yeah.
Like when I was an SDR, I was like, this is the only way to do it.
Yeah.
Now I think I've changed a little bit where I'll make that call if they're opening and engaging it and just like never answered me. There's like 5 opens. I'll probably reply to the same thread because I'm like, something's resonating here.
They're seeing this.
They're seeing it. They might be going back and opening again. Maybe they shared to someone on their team. Like there's something here. I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
But if the opposite is true, if like I'm hitting a wall and like they're not even opening it, then I'm going to start a new thread and just try a new subject line.
Yeah.
So let's start talking about the email body itself. Walk us through this 4-part framework again, and maybe we can go paragraph by paragraph.
Sure. My favorite thing to look for is if the company is hiring for a role that you would sell to. So if you sold sales technology software, and you see that the SDR team is hiring, that's a trigger. And that's what I would use. So I'm going to use that as the example. The observation might be, hey, Nick, saw you're hiring for 3 SDRs. That's your observation. Now, you as the prospect, you don't actually know if someone's maybe trying to apply for that SDR role, or like you don't even know what the deal is here. So you have to continue reading now.
Yeah.
And now the second part of the email is the problem statement. So what problem is associated to hiring? In this example, it might be ramp time. Hey, Nick, saw you're hiring for 3 new SDRs. Problem with that typically is SDR ramp time, and they're actually not able to hit their quota in 4 months, whatever that is. You can even go even further and saying what the outcome of that is. That would affect your bottom line, your revenue, pipeline, etc. 3 would be the solution. So how does your solution specifically solve for that problem? When I was at DemandBase, we solved so many problems. Like the solution was very complex. And so that was a very important part that a lot of SDRs that were new, unfortunately, just made the mistake of. So you always want to match your solution to the problem statement. So our solution might be, we provide them with intent data so that they actually can hit their quota faster and find opportunities faster, thus lowering their ramp time, right? That might be the solution. And then the last part of it is your CTA, your call to action. And I came from the world of door-to-door sales. We were taught to like close on the spot, get a yes, like right then and there. That's a bad habit that I had to shed in tech sales. In tech sales, in the software industry, I think Gong produced some data where interest-based call to actions perform the best. So instead of asking for a specific time or date, you ask, are you interested to learn more about this?
I want to zoom in on the solution paragraph, oddly enough. You worked at DemandBase, and DemandBase does a lot of different things other than just intent data. I'm sure you've talked to marketers who are like, no, don't only describe one part of our solution. You're going to pigeonhole them in intent data. Talk about how DemandBase is an all-in-one platform or an end-to-end solution that does these 17 different things. Could you talk about how do you describe your solution in a way that's specific without making you sound like a niche point solution?
The first things I see reps doing that it's wrong, they just say, hey, we do all these things. And they're like, well, what does that mean? How does that apply to me? A really good exercise that I recommend doing for new reps is list out all of the personas. This is what I tell every single new SDR that joined at DemandBase. At DemandBase, man, we had so many personas, probably more than 8 different personas that we sold to. Write all those out. Each of those will get their own problem statement. So when we sold at DemandBase, if we sold to marketing ops, the problem was that they had to manually score and segment and create reports for marketing and sales. We can automate that. The problem for digital marketers was that their ads aren't reaching the right people. The problem statement for a sales team is their sales reps are going after the wrong accounts. Completely different problem statements. So write those out, align them to the right persona. And then each persona actually gets their own solution as well. So again, going back to that sales use case, if the problem is the sales team doesn't know which accounts to reach out to, the solution is DemandBase can help your reps do that, find the accounts to reach out to using intent data, right? So you always want to match those up. And that exercise is really, really helpful for new reps.
The key thing is your sentence is focused on DemandBase helps you solve the problem. And this is the thing that we do that allows us to solve the problem. But the focus is on the fact that this is the problem that exists. This is the minimum amount of information that you need to know that we can effectively solve the problem. I'm curious if we take this same message, but we take it up 2 levels. You're sending this email to a CMO. My guess is you're not just going to talk about hiring an SDR and something that's like feature level, like intent data. How does your messaging change above the line?
My favorite thing actually was getting executives on calls. When I was early in my sales career, I hated it though, because I couldn't figure that piece out. It was the hardest thing for me. And I would say my last 2 years of selling, like it just clicked and I actually preferred it much better. And so, you're right. You're not looking for the day-to-day things. They care about that because they want their team to be happy, but truthfully, it's not going to influence their buying decision. So you have to look at more of a macro use case. How is it going to affect the entirety of their business? If they're an executive, they're really, really, really tied into the revenue, the pipeline goals. They want to be successful. If it's a private company, they want to take that company public. If it's a public company, they want the stock to do well. I sold to this company that's in the warehouse management space. They're publicly traded. And so a lot of information was out online about them that I could leverage. I remember we had a meeting with their CMO, and the things that I was looking for was stuff in their 10K. So I found out through my research that you guys are really known for warehouse management, but you have 6 other different solutions that no one knows about you guys for. And so at DemandBase, we're going to help you guys become more of that holistic partner in the entire warehouse segment, not just that one point solution. So that was my talk track for the whole thing. And then you bake in your value prop for each of those points and how you'll help solve for that.
Then I want to talk about email style. I understand the purpose of each paragraph, but the way that you're delivering this doesn't sound robotic. It sounds conversational. And I've seen a lot of sellers who will have the right ingredients in their messaging,
Mm.
but the delivery sounds super salesy or super robotic or super formal. And so if you're coaching a new rep on their email language and their writing style, how do you make sure that your emails don't sound robotic?
Hmm. I actually think the number one thing that you can do to get like instant results is just about brevity. So most reps that I talk to when I coach them on like cold email, their emails are always too long. Always. That's like the first thing you can look at before you even read the email. You can just look at it and say, there's too many words here.
Mhm.
Brevity is king in cold email. So literally, like, do the exercise, read your email out loud to yourself. You'll realize how many unnecessary words are in it. I try to keep my emails between 75 and 120 words. Now, if it's 130 words, I mean, it's a bad cold email. No, obviously not. But that's the exercise you want to do, is making sure that the email is super, super short. And I'll go as far as literally saying, like, we go back to the observation statement. Instead of saying, I noticed, I'll literally just start it with noticed.
Mhm.
Like, I'm that maniacal about like, what words can I remove? But like, it still makes sense, but it's not grammatically correct, but it still makes sense.
A lot of other mistakes involve preambles where reps will say, "Oh, I was just checking in," or they'll say, "I wanted to see if you were open to taking a look at our solution,"
Mhm.
instead of just saying, "Open to taking a look."
Yes. Or like, people used to be taught this was saying, the reason I'm reaching out is,
Mhm.
you don't need to say that over email.
Right.
You're literally reaching out. You don't need to say the reason I'm reaching out is, or we go back to the observation statement. And I think what's helpful people get started is someone saying, I read in your 10K. You can
Mhm.
just say like, this happened per
Yeah.
your 10K.
Yeah.
You don't need to say like, I read it necessarily.
Yeah, the source of the information, if you're looking for a way to cut down on your email length, removing the source and just stating the observation,
Mhm.
because that information probably lives in a lot of places. They're 10K, they might have been on a podcast and they talked about it, and it just unnecessarily clutters them saying, I read it here or I listened to it here, as opposed to saying, I know this about you.
Right.
I'm curious about like the level of formality that you go to. Like if there's a spectrum of like, one is you're talking to, I don't know, a US senator, and then the other one is like you're hanging with your college buddies over some drinks. Where would you say that you land?
I would say that I probably fall somewhere between a 6 or a 7.
Okay.
I would never ever send an email professionally that's just like on that other spectrum of
Yeah.
like college buddies. So I probably would fall somewhere between 6 and 7, because I think if you go overly formal, then it just sounds like a bit too formal and like someone like AI wrote it or something.
Hmm.
So yeah, 6 or 7 is probably that sweet spot, I'd say.
This isn't just for prospecting emails. I see a really big mistake reps make with in-deal cycle emails. So let's say, for example, you get off a discovery call, you send your recap email, and then you weren't able to get a meeting on the books, so you ask for a meeting. They don't respond. A lot of times when you reply to that email, people will clutter the email where they say, "Hey, I was thinking about our call last week, and I just wanted to follow up because I know we talked about doing these next steps." And then at the bottom of the email, it's like, "Are you free on Thursday or Friday?"
Mhm.
And so if I send a recap email and they don't respond, and a couple days have passed, I will literally just reply to the email and I'll be like, "Hey, how's Friday or Monday?"
Yeah.
That's it. One sentence, like 6 words. And when you strip down all of the noise and you let your email be nothing but the question, you will be amazed how much more people actually respond.
Well, one thing I picked up from you, Armand, is leading the email with the next steps up front, as opposed to what I had been taught in my like early sales training days was like, oh, you put the action items at the very end. But the problem is folks aren't scrolling that far in your recap email. You lead with the things that you need them to do, and then the other stuff comes after. I think you call it bluff or bottom line up front.
So let's say you send out these prospecting emails. I've seen 2 camps of thought with objection handling over emails.
Mm.
Camp number 1 is if someone says, "I'm not interested," over email, delete the email and move on.
Mhm.
Camp number 2 is use that because you actually have their attention and try to send an email response, pick up a cold call them on the spot, whatever it is. So when people are sending you objections over email, what is your strategy?
Always answer. Always answer. Because that also looks really bad on your part too. If like you're emailing them nonstop and they finally just take time out of their day just to say, hey, I'm not interested. So you
Mhm.
stop emailing them and then you don't answer them. That's not a good look.
How do you respond?
Depends what it is, right? If it's just like a really bluff, like, hey, we're not interested, and they were just trying to like tell me to, F off,
Yeah.
I'll probably still send another message, be like, hey, no problem. This is a line that I actually love to use.
Yeah.
I'll say, hey, before you never hear from me again,
Hmm.
the reason I reached out was X, Y, and Z. And I'll say that. And I use that phrase all the time. And it doesn't always work for sure.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, you'll get either more information. They'll maybe clarify, hey, the reason I wasn't interested is because we literally just bought your competitor. We were stuck for a 3-year deal. Okay, cool. Now I can update my notes. Or they might actually be like, okay, that makes sense. Actually, I'm not the right person, but here's the right person on my team.
Yeah.
You get something out of it.
Yeah, you know what it kind of reminds me of is this is something I learned from Jason Bay actually as a cold call objection handling approach where what he teaches people to do is a lot of times on a cold call, someone as a brush off will be like, yeah, just send me an email. And what a lot of people, like, the way they try to overcome it is they're like, oh, do you really want an email, or are you just telling me to go away? And what Jason recommends is he goes, instead you say, hey, no problem, I'm happy to send you an email. Just so I make sure that it's really like custom tailored to you. Are you like the other CFOs of the insurance defense law firms that I'm talking to that are really frustrated with all of these deductions, rejections, and appeals that they get on the bills they send to their insurance carrier clients? He basically resurfaces the problem proposition and the reason that he reached out in the first place as a way to like punch him in the face and be like, hey, like this is a personalized outreach to you. And it sounds like you're doing something similar where you're like, hey, no problem. Before you never hear from me again, here's again the reason that I reached out as a way to show like this is not robotic. This isn't AI. This is not some templated spam. Like, this is me personalizing my outreach. That's really, really sharp. I like it. Well, then the clock is ticking and we are running out of time, so we got to move to the final question. And the final question is this. We've talked about a lot of really great things salespeople should be doing. Now I'm going to flip it on its head and ask you about a shouldn't. And so the last question is, what is one bad habit that you see a lot of salespeople exhibiting that you think they need to break because it hurts them more than it helps?
One bad habit that I see a lot of salespeople make is giving generic demos. And unfortunately, I've seen this all too many times where reps, I don't know if this is an issue of like not prepping enough or what, but they'll just basically hop into a demo and show the exact same walkthrough that they basically show every single prospect.
Yeah.
And they're just hoping that the prospect relates to that and says, great, I love it, I'll buy it. Whereas instead, you can use storytelling to tell a better narrative and better tie in how the solution works for that specific buyer.
Yeah. So
the easiest way to get better at storytelling is to switch any time that you're basically going through a demo and saying, and then we do this, and then you do that, and then you do this, swap that out for but therefore. So when you're going through the demo, you can say, you're trying to target better accounts, but the issue is you don't know which accounts to go after. Therefore, your ad campaigns have a negative ROI, right? And so you're literally saying that through the entire demo, and that's going to resonate a lot more with the buyer and make them want to make a purchase decision.
Phenomenal. Well, Vin, thank you for joining us. Everybody stick around for a 60-second recap coming up soon.
Alrighty, Nick, it's time for a 2x2 recap from this episode with Vin Matano. What do you have for your 2?
So the first is, do not neglect Twitter, now X, as a way to direct your buyer's attention at your personalized email that you sent them. Vin would literally record a video and tweet that video at the CMOs that he was prospecting to as a way to get them to go look at his personalized email. Number 2 is when it comes to follow-up emails, there's 2 approaches you can take with whether or not you reply to your previous emails. Vin recommends if they haven't been opening your previous emails, send a new thread. Since the last one has gotten buried, it might be in spam even. But if they have been opening your emails, just thread and follow up to the previous chain so they can see those past outreach efforts.
Number 3, the perfect cold email framework includes number 1, an observation. Number 2, the problem with that observation. Number 3, the solution to that problem. And then lastly, number 4, a call to action. And then lastly, number 4 triggers can give you 4 different emails. So if you have your solution, don't send them the same exact email every single time. Find 4 bits of research and use that to write 4 awesome emails. Alrighty, Nick, how can people help us out?
So Vin doesn't use sequences, but a lot of you probably do. And we put together the perfect 30 MPC outbound sequence that has all the different channels, the steps, example outbound messaging that you can use and craft for your own outreach. There's a link in the show notes. Go check it out. It has helped me with my outbound prospecting because I know you put a lot of work in it. Take a look. We'll see you next week on the show.